right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of BuzzBeat. Welcome back to BuzzBeat. This is Brian Geisinger. On today's podcast, I will be joined by longtime co-host Spencer Percy, Richie Randall, out of sight, but certainly not out of mind on the ones and twos producing. It has been a few weeks since we last recorded, as we're sort of continuing to figure things out in this new format. Probably not going to be too many post-game pods this year, but we're trying to schedule these ahead in advance and also have the live component along with the podcast going up the following day. And we'll just try to do some periodic check-ins on the team throughout the season. And a lot has taken place, Spencer, since we last recorded. But before we get to that, before I ask you how you're doing or what costume you're going to have for Halloween this year, would just like to say, it really warmed my heart to hear from a lot of listeners and people on Twitter and stuff like that when we put the last episode up. Just people talking about how much they enjoyed, having us come back, even if it's in this sort of like different format and stuff. So I don't think I'm the only one who saw that stuff and felt a level of appreciation to it. So we'd just like to say it was very kind of everyone who sort of like reached out and sent along their praises to us. We really appreciated that. So with that aside, Spencer, how are you doing? Are you ready for Halloween? What are your plans this year? Are you on trick-or-treat duties? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, I'm good. Good to see you boys. You're here from you boys as always. And Halloween, no, I'm never ready this time of year. It's like the busiest time of year, my work schedule. So I'm not ready for Halloween is the answer to that. I do not know when I'm going to be. I'm flying home from DC tomorrow from a work trip. So coming in hot and waking up Thursday, going to work, and then we're going to trick or treat. So, but no, all's well in my world. And the Hornet season, off to I'd say a pretty good start, which we'll get into. You start 2 of 3 on the road, and it's just going to take a while for this schedule to get a little softer. But I think we got some really good stuff to dig into. Hope you're well, BG. What's going on with you?
Not too much. Getting ready for college hoops. NBA season obviously underway with the Hornets. Just a lot of college basketball. I've been at a few Duke exhibition games so far this season. I've gotten to see likely future number 1 pick Cooper Flagg up close, which has been cool. I'll be there. I'll be at Cameron next Monday for opening night. I also got the heads up that I'll be back doing some High Point games this season as the color analyst on ESPN Plus. So that's exciting. And as I was telling Richie before we hopped on, my sister is expecting her first child in the next couple of days. So looking forward to becoming an uncle for the first time. I think that'll be pretty cool. And everyone in my family is very excited about it. So looking forward to that. Lots of good stuff coming right here, right now. My brother-in-law, like you, Spencer, is a big Virginia basketball fan. So I'm curious to see how he's going to juggle being a first-time father with watching the Wahoos this season. But my guess is he'll find a way. So, okay.
Well, on that, BG, on that. Yeah, I knew you couldn't help yourself. You had to bring it up. So, yeah. Well, I will be. Yeah, I'm expecting my second child in February, and I think this is the right year. I think it's the right year to be underwater and not to have to worry about March Madness. Time will tell, but we'll see. I like throw your dirt. Everybody get it in now because we'll be back.
Yeah. We will spare everyone, including Richie, from the giving Tony Bennett his flowers, which he certainly do. But awesome coach. We'll really miss having him in the ACC, covering him in the ACC. Virginia had an identity, and they were a really fun team, awesome team to cover that was unique on both sides of the court and put guys in the NBA and was like a very successful player development place. And there are plenty of cases, including guys that are currently on NBA rosters. We saw one of them the other night for the Atlanta Hawks with DeAndre Hunter, of guys who went there and, sort of like unheralded type or, maybe top 100, top 50 recruits and then turned into lottery picks, first round picks, that type of stuff. So salute to Tony Bennett, Ron Sanchez, big shoes to fill. And yeah, we'll see what the next few chapters look like for Virginia basketball. But salute to Tony Bennett, we former Charlotte Hornets. So there, it's relevant to the podcast. Speaking of the Hornets, they opened the season on the road with a win at Houston, loss at Atlanta, and a loss during the home opener to Miami. I thought all of those games, Spencer, we're not going to get into the sort of like the details of all of those games since they're all in the past, all by several of days. By the time a lot of people are listening to this podcast, the Hornets and Raptors are going to be playing Wednesday night. But we'd like to sort of talk about some larger trends within the team. And I think we have to start with what my guess would be is sort of like the most relevant or sort of attention gathering aspect of this, which is the start to the season for LaMelo Ball. I know it's 3 games, but 32 points per game, 7 assists, 6 rebounds on 47% shooting, 42% on threes, 54% on twos. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? 8 free throw attempts per game. That looks really good. 92% shooting from the line. He's playing great. I've got some thoughts on that, but just from your perspective, what have you seen from LaMelo so far this season? What's jumped out the most to you?
Well, what's jumped out the most, I think, is just like he's clearly very healthy, right? I mean, that's you have to start there. So that's super encouraging. I mean, LaMelo is playing LaMelo Ball basketball right now, pushing the pace, getting into his step backs, being very creative off ball screens, and you brought it up, the him getting to the charity stripe to the degree he is right now is very, very encouraging. And just obviously the efficiency shooting wise. I mean, sometimes you watch LaMelo play basketball and you say that there's no way that shot's going in, but it does. I mean, he's unconventional. He's unconventional in that way, and that's okay. But the efficiency is great to see right now. Yeah. So, I mean, there's nothing really bad to say about LaMelo. The end of the Miami game was, and this isn't all on LaMelo, but he's going to get picked on defensively at the end of games. And, Butler kind of put him into a little bit of a mousetrap there at the end of that Miami game, which is, Jimmy Butler's going to put a lot of guys, even good defenders in this league, and into that kind of situation. But look, I didn't expect him to look this good and this healthy early in the year. So it's a great sign. Now we just got to get Brandon healthy.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about the injury to Brandon Miller. That's I think hands down sort of like the biggest bummer in Hornets world. He will be, from everything I'd seen, he'll be reevaluated at the end of this week on Friday. So, he's obviously not going to play against Toronto. I think that was already announced along with Mark Williams. Who knows about those the Celtics games, the doubleheader in Uptown against the Celtics on Friday and Saturday. We'll see what Miller's status might look like with the glute injury. But yeah, as far as LaMelo goes, you nailed it. I mean, like his health is the big thing, and just seeing him out there healthy, moving well. I know there was a bit of an injury scare the other night in the I guess it was the Atlanta game. So good to see him, able to come back and play against Miami. And he's been awesome this season. Like there's really, I think he's maybe been like a little loose with the basketball, like in terms of the turnovers. Like I think he's had a couple of like pretty big turnover games. There's obviously a ton of pressure on him to create. And right now, especially without Miller, there's unless he's playing next to Trey Mann, which those lineups have been good offensively for Charlotte with Mann and LaMelo together. There's not like a ton of like secondary ball handling on the court. It's like Miles Bridges. That's kind of, it's kind of it if it's the starters, and I mean, Cody Martin can give you a little downhill drives, a little bit here and there. And just all of a sudden, like there's a lot on LaMelo to create. I think his ability to like play in one-on-one situations, get into contact has been good. I think he's done a nice job turning the corner, using his strides, getting into the paint, and either creating contact or kicking out the shooters in the corners. I think he's been finding guys on those drives, like the early kickouts. I think we've seen some creative passing from him just in terms of like the pick and pop game when he's working with Grant Williams, or it's a guard screen with LaMelo Ball and Seth Curry, or LaMelo Ball and Trey Mann. I think those have been like good actions for the Hornets so far this season. LaMelo himself, on 33 used possessions as a pick and roll ball handler, 1.18 points per possession, and he's 9 of 17 on pick and roll threes this season. So like he's gotten to the pull up, he's gotten to the step back when he gets a switch, and if he sees drop coverage, like he's got some stuff he can do against that. Obviously, like you'd love for him to be a guy that could really like heat up and pressure the rim, but just that in between game, his live ball feel in the in between game, and just the touch, I think on sort of like his floating finishes around the hoop has really like popped this year. I think he's just, he's played great so far. Just can this guy, can he stay healthy? Because like not only do I think this is sustainable, I mean maybe some of the he's not going to shoot 55% on pick and roll threes this season, but I think there's other like low hanging fruit to grab. I like some of the lineup usage with him, where he's been able to play, next to Mann or Micic. What have your thoughts been on some of the sort of like double, the lineups that basically have like multiple, like I guess like smaller skinny guards on the court? How have you felt about those so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Charles Lee's been working with a little bit of you got Seth Curry, Micic, LaMelo, like no Brandon Miller. It kind of really highlights the how thin that backcourt can actually get, especially if you're not with a guy like Brandon Miller. I've liked it. I mean, it certainly has its long lineage of deficiencies on the defensive end, but there's been no lack of creativity, I think, on the other end, on how we create advantages for LaMelo. And I thought his pace was really good at the beginning of last season in terms of coming off the ball screen, or just when even if he went past a guy off the dribble that was recovering, when he got into the middle of the floor, instead of getting himself trapped under the rim or somewhere on that baseline area where he had to throw it out for a pass, he's really gotten to that long last step where it just unlocks his length, right? To get that little floater up, which you were just referencing. And that's all about becoming a more mature offensive basketball player. And we're seeing LaMelo do it. So Charles Lee has a lot of creativity offensively. And I think we've seen it, early this season. The Seth Curry, LaMelo Ball kind of ghost screen actions at the top have been, I don't know the exact numbers on them, but they certainly seems like they've been very effective. And I guess the last thing I would say, I like Micic in there with LaMelo too, because Micic is a guy that isn't the most spry defender ever in terms of how quick he is, but he's got more length and size than you actually realize. And I kind of like those two in a pinch, right? We're in a pinch right now, but I like those two playing together more often. So overall, I think, look, we've been in every single game. We've had a chance to win every single game. And I think Charles Lee has done, overall, offensive, defensive. I know that wasn't your question, but I think I would give him a B+. I think he's done a fantastic coaching job so far this season, considering what he's had at his disposal.
Totally agree. We're going to talk about Lee a little bit more later in the pod. I think he's been, I'm just very bullish. I like the hire. I was bullish through summer league and preseason, and what I'm seeing so far. I'm really like endorsing, because I think it's been a lot of good stuff. Yeah, the minutes with Mann and LaMelo on the court together. Charlotte, I mean, this is like exactly what you would expect. Charlotte, 126.5 points per 100 possessions on offense. They're also giving up 127.1 points per 100 possessions on the other end. I do think like LaMelo for the most part has like competed and done some cool stuff as like an off-ball defender. I thought when he's had to like chase guys off handoffs and screens, he's applied his length and like shown some verve in those situations. I'll be honest, like I not to do the whole like Homer analysis here. I thought the Hornets got a really tough whistle against Miami. I mean, Bam Adebayo picked up a couple of free throws in that game that were like it's kind of embarrassing. Like the free, like
It was the most like
it was
old
it was
that whistle ever.
yeah
It was kind of but I think it's going to change this year in the NBA, and we've already seen returns of that being the truth. But Miami plays such a different style at the end of
yeah
games.
yeah
They play bully ball.
yeah
They shrink the
target
court.
yep yep
Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean. So like they're just gonna turn it into a wrestling match, and Charlotte's gonna have a hard time playing in those games, even when
yeah
Brandon Miller's healthy. They're not gonna be able to out physical anybody.
yeah.
So I'll at least give the refs a little bit of a pass for the whistle from that standpoint, but it was very frustrating.
Yeah, and I will say that was the one thing. I mean, having the NBA back the last week has been super fun. It was a reminder too of just having NBA refs back in your life and how that's like just a traumatic experience. I don't know,
Forgot
man.
how
Like
much I missed it. Yeah, it's
the
crazy.
the Trey Young whistle in the Hawks game, the Jimmy Butler whistle in the Miami game was like, oh man, it just yeah, same old episode, once again. But those guys are obviously amazing players. They're two of the best grifters in the world. It's like what makes them like part of what makes them special offensive players. Like they do an excellent job manipulating the officials, hats off, but it doesn't necessarily make for like a super fun watch at times. Last thing I would say on LaMelo here, I think over his career, I think a lot of people, including us on the podcast, but even what former NBA writer Zach Lowe, like people would often talk about wanting to see more and more patience from LaMelo out of the pick and roll. I think especially when Charlotte gives him those double drag looks off a make or off a miss, but we're seeing it a lot off of a make. Um, I think he's doing a nice job, like seeing if there's a switch. Is he coming off into drop coverage? Is there a switch? Which person is switching out onto him? And then just sort of like making plays out of that. I think there's been a lot of good stuff out of that. And when they're able to I know Brandon's missed a lot of time to start the year, but when they're able to get Miller as one of the two screeners and those double drag looks, the pick and pop with Miller is there all day. And at some point during the season, fingers crossed for Mark Williams, we're going to get double drag where it's LaMelo Ball flying up the court. He comes over the first screen with Brandon Miller. Miller pops. He comes over the second screen with Mark Williams. Mark Williams dives. And all of a sudden, it's going to be Williams rolling to the hoop, LaMelo coming off the double screens, and Brandon popping into space. And like, it's going to be awesome when we see it. I cannot wait. Like, I just give it to me. I need it at some point. I need to see it. But I just think LaMelo, aside from some of the turnovers, which have not been great, I mean, he's also just taken some ridiculous shots. He's made a lot of them this season. But I do think his patience in those points has been, in those sort of like decision-making points, has been good, especially given just like how much is on his plate from a playmaking load. And yeah, I put this in the doc. Obviously, it's just a 3-game sample, but the team, really struggling offensively in the minutes without LaMelo. So with Ball on the court this season, Charlotte 1.2 points per possession in the 41 minutes with LaMelo off the floor. You're looking at 0.91 points per possession. And in the lineups where you're really leaning on Man or Bridges to prop up the offense. It just hasn't been there. I think Trey Mann has played quite well, but at least early on the first week of the season, I don't think he's either Bridges or Mann have really sort of popped as floor raisers with the second unit. We'll see how that, keep an eye on how things go, but I will be kind of curious to see what lineups I guess look like without LaMelo this year. How are he and Miller being staggered? What does that look like? Just sort of do you have any thoughts on sort of what the playmaking and lineup apparatus looks like when LaMelo's on the bench?
Outside of the fact that we've barely seen any of this season with Brandon Miller on the floor, not really. I do think it's important because right now, offensively, Charles Lee's his main go-to is I got to stagger I got to stagger Man and LaMelo as much as I can. Then I got to play them together in like very important minutes because that's my best source of offense. But also have to keep the offensive afloat by one of them at a time. So Brandon Miller just helping with that staggering, I think, will uncover some new some new developments. And so I think the data is a little skewed, I guess, in some ways right now with Brandon not playing. But I will say this. Here's one thing that's very obvious to me about the Hornets offense, and I don't know why I should be that surprised by it, but they are not going to have a hard time creating advantages off the dribble and creating open shots. But if they don't knock down open shots, specifically three-point shots, this offense is going to struggle a lot because they have no way to get to a mismatch anywhere in the mid zone to post area. And, you know what I mean? They just have no post up guy. They have no post up guys. So not one on the entire roster. So they've got to be one of the top 10, if not top 5 outside shooting teams in the NBA, I think, to have a top 12 to 15 offense.
Yeah. And look, so far this season, 34.3% of their field goal attempts have been above the break threes. I mean, that's a lot of, LaMelo and Trey Mann pull-ups, obviously. And yeah, like I was thinking about, it's funny you brought up the post-up component. It's like, I was thinking about this earlier, like, Grant can like pass out of the post, but like he's not really like a threat to score. He's not like a mismatch guy or like a guy that you just like when you throw it to Miller, when you throw it to Grant Williams, in the mid post or at the elbow or whatever, that's so you can like run actions off of it, right? It's just so you can like sort of like invert the offense for a little bit and try to get into some movement. I mean, like in theory, I think Bridges was like supposed to be like the matchup beater, for them in those instances. And I just, I haven't seen that from him thus far. So I agree with you. I think the one other way they can sort of like simulate that to an extent has been the offensive rebounding component. And I mean, the Hornets have they've been very good on the offensive glass so far this season, Nick Richards in particular, but like, that's the way they can sort of like, Richards can catch it on a putback opportunity against maybe a defense that's like a little out of position. He can, go back up with a, for a putback or something like that. The Hornets are currently, this is one of my favorite stats of theirs so far this season. They're entering games on Tuesday. They were number 1 in the NBA with a 17.3%. Or I guess, pardon me, actually, they're averaging, forgive me, they're first in the NBA by averaging 17 offensive rebounds per game with an offensive rebound rate of 37%, which was also tops in the NBA. So like that's also maybe sort of like bolstering. I mean, they're like fringy top 10 offense, top 15 offense so far. And it does feel like a little bit of that's being bolstered by just sort of like being good on the offensive glass. Richards is close to 5 offensive rebounds per 36 minutes. I don't know. I'd be curious to know if you had any thoughts on just sort of like that component of the team, or if you had sort of like another like stat that had jumped out to you within this sort of like small sample theater so far. And if not on either of those things, I'd kind of be curious to know just like your thoughts on the play of Richards so far this season.
I think Richards has been fine. I mean, Richards he is a damn force around the rim. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's not going to be a short roll passer. Or, I mean, he can be, but he's not going to be a super efficient one.
Yeah.
But he's a good second chance guy. He's going to pull down an offensive rebound or two, and he's done a nice job of that. The one thing, it's not really a stat, but just eye test wise, I've been a little, and I guess it's why I just said what I said about this team needs to be a really good shooting team. They need to find ways to get guys into short roll areas where they can make plays from the pass, and open up that baseline area, open up kickouts that lead to drives. But they've got to find a way to do something else other than just getting Trey Mann or LaMelo Ball, into the middle of the floor and then spraying it out for a shot. Like that those are great plays. Don't get me wrong, but that was kind of my point. Like you got to knock down those shots at a very high rate for that to be an efficient kind of offense. And so I would like to see Grant Williams a little bit more in the middle of the floor. How do we unlock him? How do we create a screen the screener kind of situation that gets Grant now setting a ball screen and gets him in, into the short roll with a shorter guy on him where he can make a play and getting a cut off that. The Hornets got to do a better job of finding shots at the rim. Like they just have to. Without Brandon, without Mark Williams, I understand those are two very important players. We haven't seen Mark Williams for a long time, so we don't actually know what he's going to be when he gets back. But the part that's not sustainable to me offensively, although the offense I think has looked okay early in the year, is there's just too many outside shots. It's way too many.
It's a lot of off dribble outside shots. And I mean, like part of this is like not having Miller for, 2.5 of the 3 games so far. Like, I think he just like loosens so much stuff up. Not like he's like a rim pressure guy, but just like his gravity, his off ball play, his screening is like a big factor for that. He's really the guy that if you throw it to in the post and you're running actions off of it, Miller's used to be Terry Rozier. Seth Curry gives you some of that now, but I mean, he's in his 10th or 11th season in the NBA and he's, 6'2", 6'3". He's not, 22-year-old Brandon Miller at 6'9", flying off of, pin downs and flares and split cuts, that type of stuff. It's just a totally different thing. And I think the offense really misses that about Miller. This was actually like one of my concerns with them heading into the season. I actually mentioned this, Spencer, when I went on with Nate Duncan to do the Dunked On preview for the Hornets, was that I don't think they're light on shooting. I think they have a lot of guys that can stand still and hit a jumper. And obviously they've got a guy like LaMelo and Miller who obviously have great pull-up range and man to an extent too. But just other than Miller and Curry and I guess LaMelo, they don't really have guys that run around and come off screens looking for shots, hunting jumpers like what Terry does. Yep. And now that you don't have Miller, who was clearly the best at doing that on the roster, it just makes them, I think, they're a little more predictable, basically. And I do kind of wonder, we talked about this on the last pod. We've seen a ton of it so far this season. The Hornets are playing this, 5 slot or slot 5 offense a lot, however you want to describe it, where the center, Richards or Diabate, Case, sometimes it's Grant playing small ball 5. They're getting stationed a lot, to the left wing, and I think that is helping. It's helping open up the floor for drives, and they can get into some second side actions off of it. They can run some movement sets off of it, but there is also there's not a big guy down in the dunker spot, that there is a trade-off to it. There's not a drop off, even when they get into the LaMelo Bridges 1-4 pick and roll, they're doing that with, Richards or Diabate 20 feet from the rim, right? Not in the dunker spot like they would normally be. And we'd seen in years past how good PJ Washington was, right? At on the 1-4 pick and roll, being able to catch it in space and then make either the kick out pass or the lay down pass to the center in the dunker spot, and just how guys like Plumlee and Richards and Williams really fed off that when PJ was here. I think Grant Williams is the guy to do that. Maybe Bridges, but we just haven't seen a ton of it with Grant Williams so far this season. And even with Miles, I don't think it's really been a thing. They tried to get to some Bridges, Grant Williams pick and roll at the end of the Miami game to see if they could, I think just sort of use the the size and strength component there, and it didn't. I don't think it quite hit. So, but I do think that's something they got to get into a little bit more.
I look, I totally agree. Between Grant Williams, Miles Bridges, and Cody Martin, you got 3 guys who are good screeners and can catch the ball in the middle of the floor and make a play with it off the pass and make a read. Right now, whether or not Nick Richards is on the floor and spaced or Diabate in the dunker spot, I don't think it matters. You can still utilize a cut, but and look, again, I think Charles Lee's done a great job. I would just like to see, and it's early in the season, and I know Brandon's coming back soon, and Mark hopefully will be here soon. So, you don't want to confuse the whole playbook with all this creativity, but I think there's opportunities with those 3 guys specifically. not late in the game, but in the middle of the game, throughout the life of the game,
Mhm.
to really mix it up offensively with them as a screener in the middle of the floor with Melo coming off. Because I
Yeah.
just think that would open up so many alleys.
One of the things I thought they got to that I'd like to see a lot more of, they used this for the first time, even going back to the preseason, where like they came out on multiple times against Miami with sort of like a 1-4 flat, 1-4 low setup. And then they ran, like screen the screener, ran pick and roll where Seth Curry set, an off ball screen for Grant Williams. Then he would lift up and set a ball screen for LaMelo. And then you can get the little like exit screen off the baseline for Curry. Like I like that look a little bit. Would kind of like to see a little bit more of that. Just kind of getting into some like pick the picker, screen and roll type stuff with LaMelo and Grant Williams. But Grant was such like a weapon for Charlotte the final like third of the season last year in terms of like a guy you could throw it to and then run actions off of. And I'd kind of like to see a little bit more of that, more of the corner action, more of the like Chicago, or zoom action, but the pin down into a dribble handoff. And like it's early, but you are seeing a lot of the Charlotte, they're going to give you what you're seeing a lot of is the double drag look. You're seeing, horn set up with one of the guards, popping out to the wing in a chase ball screen coming from the center. You're seeing a lot of the 1-4 low sets that like especially at like the end of quarters, excuse me. And I'm curious to see sort of like where some more of the variety comes in. And I do think Miller is like pretty crucial to unlocking a lot of that just because he's so malleable. He's a good screener. He's such a good shooter. He can handle a little bit too. It just feels like he's sort of like the key for really unlocking that. All right. Anything else on the any other thoughts on maybe the offense or some of the lineup combinations we've seen from Charlotte so far this season?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, let's move on to the final segment for today's show. Okay, it's spooky season. I don't know if you and the family, Spencer, have y'all been watching any scary movies? Personally, not a big scary movie guy myself. If they're on, and other people are watching them around me, I'll sit in and watch them, but I'm not going to voluntarily watch a scary movie. I do watch a lot of Hornets basketball, which I suppose in years past that's been kind of a scary conundrum. But as far as movies go, not really my thing. But it is Halloween. It's trick or treat season as well. So to sort of like wedge in here a little themed segment for this pod, we're going to do this one. It's going to be a little trick or treat segment, and we're going to focus on. I think what I think I would sort of like bluntly put as like some of the less conventional approaches from Charlotte to matching up defensively. So to me, what I've just noticed watching them play in preseason in the regular season is like if Charlotte plays an opponent that's got a stretch five or they've got a non-shooting wing, they're going to cross match at the 4 and 5, right? They're going to put their power forward, Bridges or Grant Williams on the stretch five. We saw that with Karl Anthony Towns in the New York matchups. They're going to switch those actions, occasionally mix in some drop. When they played the Hawks over the weekend, the Hawks have Dyson Daniels, who has had a nice start to the season for him so far, but they're going to put the 5 on him in the 4 and the 5, and that way they can switch 1-5 pick and rolls, and they can also sort of like sag off of the non-shooting wing. They did this against Amen Thompson when they played Houston, right? They're putting, Richards or Diabate on him. Same thing with Dyson Daniels. Those guys have actually made the Hornets pay with a couple of like wide open threes. But I say all of that to sort of set this up. Trick or treat. Treat being you're in favor of it. Trick being you think it's sort of like a junk defense approach and not something that's super sustainable. How have you felt about the Hornets' approach on the defense in their process on the defensive side of the court, as far as it goes with matching up in the front court room?
Yeah. Well, it's certainly been a little tricky to me. I yeah, But again, it kind of goes back to the same conversation earlier. I think that Lee's working with what he has to right now. I mean,
Mhm.
Diabate is our backup center. I think he's done a great job.
I
He's
do
done a
too.
fine
Yeah,
job.
he's played well, I thought.
But like, here we are 4 games in the season or 3 games into the season. It's like, wait, who's our backup center? So, so he's working with, and Seth Curry is your 2 guard, next to LaMelo, who, yes, is 6'7", but well documented, not a defensive stalwart. So, he's working with very little, and all the switching, all the mismatching, trying to keep the ball in front. Like I don't know how else you would really do it right now. I'm actually a little surprised that we haven't seen any zone. If we have seen any zone, I have missed it, which
Mm-mm.
is possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's doing what he's got to do to keep the ball in front right now, because we just don't have the bodies, the physicality to do it otherwise. It's definitely a trick right now. If I read what we were supposed to do with trick or
Yeah.
treat right away,
Yeah.
but but yeah, it won't last, and thank goodness we have Nick Richards on the back line. I mean, seriously, like he has been. Nick Richards is far from a perfect basketball player, but he is one of the biggest bodies at that position in the league, seriously. And I think he's done a nice job. I mean, I know he catches a lot of flack, but I think he's been a nice utility player for what we've asked him to do, which is a lot at
Yeah.
the rim early in the season. So
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if anyone, just from watching from afar, I'm not sure anyone on the roster has had to adjust more defensively with the new coaching staff than Richard so far. I mean, like we'll
oh,
see, you
totally
know,
agree with that.
we'll see Mark Williams obviously when he gets back, and I think it's interesting to think about Mark Williams at when he's at full hum and healthy and moving well, like what he could look like as a roving rim protector, in the kind of like Rob Williams from the Celtics in 2022 role. Like it's intriguing I'd like to see it. Um, and
Yeah, and
Richard,
some of the like the feedback just that I've seen sporadically online about Richards, like I just like I don't know what people like. Look around from 1 to 4 on this roster right now. What we have to offer defensively on those
yeah,
positions.
yeah, yeah,
What do you expect? Like Richards has to cover up a lot.
yeah.
So like I think we need to readjust our expectations about what he can be, because he's got to exert so much energy on the defensive end. There's not a lot left to give otherwise. I've been impressed. It's not perfect, but again, I've been impressed.
He had a couple like really bad, like kind of confusing brain fart plays in the preseason, like the possession against Memphis, where he just sort of like randomly there was a drive, he came off of Zach Edey, and he just like sort of randomly jumped, and it made for a very easy pass to an 8 foot tall man at the front of the rim. Like that,
Yeah.
he like publicly it looked really bad. Like I saw it happen, and I was watching the game on a delay. I was like, I know people are gonna be roasting this on Twitter when I like check in after the game, kind of. And I mean, sure enough, like he was getting cooked, and it was like it was it. I would love to know like what was going through his head in the moment. But yeah, like I think ultimately, like Richards is a totally like serviceable,
He's a
reserve
backup
center.
center.
Yeah, he's been
He's a
overtaxed. Totally,
backup center.
he's
Asking you to
been
do
totally
32
overtaxed.
minutes a night right now.
Yeah, totally overtaxed the last two seasons, and he's being asked to do new stuff on both sides of the floor right now, right? Like we talked about how he's not just playing spread pick and roll and hanging out in the dunker spot, right? Like they're actually asking him to sort of like space to like he took a 3 in the Miami game off a LaMelo kick out. I don't think Del Curry loved the shot all that much. But it's like, he feels empowered to take it, and they're asking him to space. So it's like you gotta like kind of threaten that, I guess, occasionally. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm not a Richards apologist. We saved that for our former co-host Lee Branscombe, who is the leader of the Richards Brigade, circa 2022. But like Lee ended up being right about that. Like Richards
Mhm.
isn't. I don't think he's a starter level center, but like I thought he was like at best like a six big guy on a roster, third center, like one of those types of things. And I think he's like pretty solid as like a reserve five. He's a good offensive rebounder. He's not like an amazing vertical threat, but if he has like some runway in the pick and roll game, like he can get up and catch a lob. Doesn't have a ton of short roll passing. It's like one every other two game, like once every like 2 to 3 games, he'll have like a short roll, like nice kick out pass, but it's certainly like not a big piece of the game.
The thing about Richards, and then I know we're going to move on. He is one of the most like underrated physical players in the league, though. Like offensive rebounding, if guys like try to get into his body, whether it be a rebound or when he catches it really close to the rim, like he is moving people
Mhm.
one way or the other, and that to me that's his greatest utility. And that's kind of what like backup centers should be able to do in the NBA. So yeah, he's no more than that. I'm not saying he's going to make an all-star team in the next 4 years, but like I think we need to like he's doing his best right now, and
Mhm.
you move him away from Charlotte, depending on the rotation, he might not even be a backup center. So let's
Yeah.
appreciate some of the things he does do pretty well. And I would say physicality wise, he's maybe not elite. No, I think he actually is elite on the NBA level. Like he's one of the tops in the NBA among
He,
centers. So
he's
let's just understand the context.
Yeah, he's always been a good offensive rebounder. I mean, I think that's an indicator of size and strength and willingness to get in there and mix it up. He had one play in the Miami game where I mean, like Lamelo hit him with a little lay down pass. It may have been deflected a little bit by Bam, but it was like one of those if he could have caught it, But I think for the most part, his hands are they're okay. And then he had there was one sort of like obvious, I thought, like, I don't know if I would give it like a full breakdown, but like Miami in the second half ran empty corner pick and roll with Hero and Adebayo. So there's no help. It was on the right side of the floor. There's no help from the corner. And like Richards was just up a little bit too high on Hero. Cause that's one of the things, like Tyler Hero wants to take a pull up 19 footer. Like, God bless him, let him have it. He was up a little too high on that. Adebayo was wide open on the roll and was able to get a dunk. And the Hornets called a timeout right after that. And look, against Miami, he was getting to play like a little bit more of a traditional setup. Getting to match up with Adebayo, but Miami's offense is obviously like pretty unorthodox with especially with all the 5 out and handoffs and split cuts, all that stuff they do. And yeah, just like the Hornets, like no matter what defense they're playing, they're going to struggle to like stay in front of the ball. It was great to see Tajon Salon make his debut against Miami. I thought he had some like nice hustle plays. He had a good little deflection steal on the backside when Miami was trying to run some split action in front of him. But he got matched up. I think it was against Jimmy Butler, like sort of like scramble situation. And I mean, Butler attacked his top foot, got right by. I mean, you just like Salon just can't stay in front of anyone on the perimeter. And obviously against Butler, it's a pretty unfair matchup. So, it's hard to sort of like anchor the defense because you got a lot of guys that can just sort of like are, flying off of drives and coming at you. But I think that the approach has been interesting, cross matching at these spots and really like dialing up how much you're willing to like put a center on a non-shooting wing. I think all of that, like it's at this point, every team in college or the NBA, WNBA is doing stuff like this. So it's not like totally out of the box and unorthodox, but like they're really going after it. Like they're really doing a lot, man. Like it is interesting. And I would like to see Mark Williams have the shot to sort of like get to play in the roving position. So I'm gonna give it a treat. It gets at least like a bite-sized candy bar for me. I think it's been it's made for some like sort of like funky moments in terms of the half court defense, but I think it's an indicator of Charles Lee just willing to try new stuff, and even if it kind of is maybe like a square peg in a round hole in terms of the personnel, I think still even with all of that, I think it has been interesting. Looking ahead to the rest of the schedule here, the Hornets, they're home for the next 3 games. They're in the middle of a 4-game homestand here. They play Toronto, and then again the doubleheader against the Boston Celtics, Charles Lee's former team. Feels like 1 or 2 of those games could get like a little scary for the Hornets, just like a little scary. And then they are on the road next Monday at the Minnesota Timberwolves. So some interesting games against some of the the top teams in the league here on the horizon, with 2 against Boston and at Minnesota. But we will be here to document this season again as much as possible. I've enjoyed what I've seen so far with the Hornets on the court, despite some of the losses. I'm still feeling like entertained and encouraged. I think the product is just like way better, way more entertaining this season to watch. So like my spirits are bolstered by all of that. Spencer, before we go, any other final thoughts from you? Looking ahead or tying up loose ends on today's pod.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I got to have this Toronto game, obviously, with the 2 coming up with Boston, just kind of a non-negotiable. And then, look, let's get Brandon healthy, number 1, and then there's very little to know about this Mark situation, but let's end with this. I'm very intrigued if this team can ever get fully healthy with Brandon and Mark back in the lineup and getting Mark, up to speed with his conditioning. I'm interested to what this can look like. I'm not expecting the moon, but I think this team's closer than some people think to being competitive. So and we've shown that so far this season. But hey, look, always good to be with you. And just look, BG, take it easy on the UVA. Hey, Ron Sanchez is a really good coach, but that's for another day. But
he is a good coach. Today was just not a tough day with Jalen Warley transferring out of the program and a 2025 recruiting decommit from a top 50 prospect. But like that stuff was to be expected, man. Like this is
it's gonna happen.
Is gonna happen. It's part of the deal, but there's still a lot to offer. And this is a big opportunity for Ron Sanchez, who has been a head coach at UNC Charlotte and is now getting to do it back in the ACC. I just think this is going to be a tough year, but let's give them some time. I think to try to rebuild this. And look, they still got a guy like Isaac McNeely, who's one of the best shooters in the country. He could still, he could be on a heater all season. I don't know where the dribbling is going to come from this year, especially without Warley. I will say has been interesting and pretty cool to see Ryan Dunn, having an impact for the Phoenix Suns so far this season, former UVA player, but also Ryan Dunn making threes,
making shots. All of us, it's like somebody gave him truth serum over
crazy, man.
It's like his shot looks good. Yeah, let's get out of here, BG. But Elijah Gertrude, can we take a big step forward? That's for Virginia this year.
We'll see. He needs to be healthy. But obviously, he is quite a talent. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in to Buzz Beat. We really appreciate you guys tuning in, whether it was live or the following days on the podcast. Spencer, I really appreciate you being on here. Richie, as always, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to produce and edit this. Your work is greatly appreciated. Everyone have a safe, fun Halloween. Eat lots of candy. Wear fun